Thanks to the conference for having me. I'm really excited to talk about all of this. It's kind of cool that you guys are in headphones because that might make it a bit more immersive, seeing as there's music involved. I mean, a little bit about myself. For 20 years, I was a music producer and a tour manager, and it's always been a bit of a gripe of mine with the way that publishing royalties, collections, and all that sort of stuff for musicians is a bit of a nightmare. It still is. Performing rights organisations around the world are still struggling to kind of deal with the complexity of royalty payments. So my entire journey in the crypto space has been, it's been at the back of my mind. You know, how can we kind of fix a broken system to make it fairer for musicians? So over the last 10 years, I initially started in the space by bringing the UK's first two-way Bitcoin ATM into the UK. I remortgaged my house, and me and my business partner Dash from This Is Number One, we imported that beast in 2014 so that we could learn about Bitcoin, about this new technology that we had no idea about. We're not, neither of us were developers in any way. So this was our baptism by fire, if you will. And actually over the next sort of 3 or 4 years, we met a lot of really interesting people just because we owned this ATM, one of which was Mike Cohen, who's one of the core developers with Stacks. He's kind of building the SBTC stuff now. So I was very lucky to meet Mike, who sort of instilled a confidence in me that everything was going to come back to Bitcoin. Exciting stuff was going to happen on Ethereum, but it made sense to link everything back to Bitcoin. And a couple of years later, we actually founded This Is Number One, which was the first NFT marketplace on Stacks. And we actually began that entire journey with music. We brought a host of pretty well-known musicians and artists from around the world, and we launched the Genesis collection, which was actually the first multimedia collection of NFTs on Stacks. We were working with people like Fatboy Slim, Cara Delevingne. I think I can play some of these here for you so you can hear these. So this is some of the stuff from the Genesis collection. This was a piece written by Fatboy Slim, especially for the collection. And then we've also got stuff by Orbital, who are legendary UK EDM act. And we also were lucky enough to have this from Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, which I really loved this one. These are like, this video here is a 700 megabyte video, so it's not something that we could have ever got onto Audionals, but certainly we're looking for ways to improve things. And this was all done with the artist Chemical X, who we were lucky enough to have been working with in the Bitcoin space fairly early on. Probably 10 years ago, we met Chemical X through our working with Bitcoin. And then we brought together this amazing collection of people. And in fact, the Cara Delevingne piece was actually the very first NFT actually sold through an on-chain transaction on the Stacks network. So we made some headlines with that, which was very cool. And in fact, then Fatboy Slim, after that, gave us 1,000 of these to give away. We couldn't even really give them away. There's only 1,000 of them, but this just shows how small the Stacks network was at the time. And this again is probably the first, it was the first music collection launched on Stacks. And so after that, the Cara piece was sold, and then, for me, my journey past This Is Number One became about Audionals quite quickly, because I've always had an interest in code, specifically. I was looking years ago about how I could incorporate code into NFTs, make NFTs that do something. And when Audionals came along, it shook everything up, because everything changed. The traditional NFTs was a piece of art connected to a proof of ownership, and it was that proof of ownership that actually existed on chain. Audionals flipped that whole thing into a single entity. So now you were, for the first time, we're dealing with an NFT that is a single entity, both in terms of its content and proof of ownership. And so that was already, very exciting. So again, as I said, my focus very early on was about music, royalties. The first contracts that we wrote for the Stax network, that Mike actually wrote, Mike Cohen wrote for Stax network, there was no SIPs in place, there was nothing, there was no framework, and so Mike was kind of making it up as he went, and it was glorious, but we were determined that we would be doing things in a non-custodial way, which kind of ended up being a bit of a rod for our backs, but it was all about trying to create a royalty system that could fairly, split royalties. Obviously, the big problem is you can't enforce it, which is where, the real world is going to need to come in. We can still build all of these structures, the framework that will hopefully present a song, eventually will present anyone who wants to see it's all of its rights, the rights for the song, the rights for the components of the song. But in order for it to be enforced, that's going to require the real world to step in. So that's going to be, hopefully, at some point in the future, the PROs, the performing rights organizations, will need to sort of step in and say, yeah, we suggest that people honor this system. So that's the big thing that we're kind of waiting for next with this issue. So, how can leveraging the blockchain help with this? And one of the things that I started looking into when I first came onto Audionals was the idea of creating songs that contained their own rights. And I've got a little example here I can show of what I started playing around with. This is just the audio file for Bohemian Rhapsody. Songs that were put on chain originally. They're quite low audio quality. In fact, I might have something here that I can play. So I think this is something that's attributed to an artist called Rare Skrilla, who put full songs on chain right in the very early beginnings. This one here is actually inscription 1440. So, very early in the game. But what they had to do to make this work was cut down the bit rate severely. They had to really change the quality of the audio to make it small enough to inscribe. I'll play a little bit here.
He was like, yo, do you know how happy I was for you to see you just shoot up to the top of the Bitcoin conversation? He was like, yo, you literally did the impossible.
We really got to figure out a better way to budget this family's future.
Bitcoin.
What?
I don't know.
It's just a tool, isn't it?
Bitcoin.
There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin mined.
Sound money.
I'm opening doors for all colors, you know what I mean? For all opinions.
So that's an example of one of the that's only a minute long, that one, but you can hear that the audio the bit rate has been restricted in order to make that a very small file. Some people did put some bigger files on there. This is inscription 3799. It's only 20 seconds, but this sounds like it's a much more full quality. So as you can hear from this, it is possible to put high quality audio on chain, but there's a big cost associated with it. So going back to what I started to try and experiment with was the idea of, at least at first, could we break up a song into individual components? If you took this as an MP3, it's going to be probably around 3.5 to 4 megabytes, which is a full block. And in fact, the biggest Audionals that you can inscribe is around 400 kilobytes. So you'd already have to break this song up into multiple parts. So what I started looking into was if I was to take a song, break it into component parts, and split those up, how I could reform them back together again on chain. And actually, it's not a particularly complicated task in terms of straight audio. What you can do is you can sort of assign each audio sample a number, and then you can just have a very small piece of code that knows that I take these audio samples and this is the order they go in. But something that I was still toying around with in my head was the idea of, like if I did this, I still needed two files. I needed a file that, I needed these files, these 1 to 7, but then I also needed another file that would contain the instructions or the information to put them back together. And that was what sort of started my thinking about creating a new standard for placing audio on the blockchain. And the idea that I came up with was about converting audio to text. It looks like a lot, but this is the protocol that I came up with, which is what I called Audionals. And the idea is that each audio sample is converted to base 64 text so that it can be placed in a JSON file, which means that now everything that you need can be contained in this one file. We've got a few headings at the top, like the name of the file and things like that, and then down there you've got the data content, which is the audio, and then beneath that we can have more metadata, which can include the rights. You know, we can add the royalties, the rights, the structure can be added to JSONs, and partly to do with the UTF-8 encoding of JSONs, which is allows for international language. This really could open up a way for the PROs, the performing rights organizations around the world, to have a single source of truth themselves, so that we can do away with some of the inefficiencies of these organizations trying to talk to each other through human interaction. You don't have to display these things. I know people say that you're putting music on chain, then it's really public, but it doesn't have to be public. You can encrypt these files. For example, if you wanted to use it just as a master copy, this would be a way to get an entire song on chain with all of its rights and royalties incorporated in it, if you needed it just to prove something in court, for example. So it doesn't have to be used for distributing the music. Someone like Taylor Swift, who obviously re-recorded all of her entire back catalogue because her label, when the label was sold, her recordings were transferred to new owners, which she wasn't happy with. And actually using a system like this where the master files can be stored in a Bitcoin wallet, it doesn't reduce the rights of the owner, but it can, through things like multisig, you could actually have a system in place, whereas if something like what happened to Taylor Swift, a label is sold to another, that there's still, the artist can have the ability at least to sign a transaction to say, I agree with this transfer of the recording rights. So that was kind of what started me off, was like looking into this idea of, how can we pull apart, recombine a song, but that obviously still, there's a big cost there. Like I said, that's going to be maybe 10, 400 or 300 kilobyte files. It's going to cost in the region of $2,000 to $4,000 for someone to put an entire song on chain. Although I do think that's a price worth paying for some of these bigger artists. It's actually quite a low price for putting something on chain where you do now have a single source of truth with its rights attached to it. But what about the normal musician? What about regular music? And that was what then really started me thinking about this idea of using these text files recursively. What could I do if I was just using individual samples? I'll just play this for you, because this is, in music, recursion, resampling, remixing, it's something that's very common. And it makes the life of the label and the artist very difficult in tracing the usage, tracking how many people have used your sample in their songs. It's become a big business for companies to actually build algorithms and software that attempts to reverse engineer pieces of audio to to be able to say, yes, your sample has been used in that piece of music. So wouldn't it be great if we could actually just have a chain that connects all these things? The thing I was going to play you here is, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Amen break, but it's actually one of the most sampled pieces of music, resampled pieces of music out there. It's a drum solo that was played in 1969 by a funk soul band called the Winstons. And at around 1 minute 25, I think, so the drummer plays a solo. You'll probably recognize it. I'll play it for you now. That's very loud. This is the sample here. These are some of the songs you'll find that have reused it.
Supreme wisdom is what I give them. Just to kill. It's how I'm living. When I'm called off, I got a sawed off. Squeeze the trigger and bodies are hauled off. Informer, you know, say that I'm a snowman, I go glam. I need keep on boom down.
So the Amen break has been used, as far as we know, in over 3,000 commercially released songs. So it's a hell of a job tracing something like that. And so, yeah, so the beginning of this process with converting the audio into these JSON files, I started experimenting. I built a very basic application to see how I could recall that text file into audio, and it was just a kick drum that I sampled. I'm just clicking the button here. You can't see my cursor there, but so it was really good. It was very accurate and very quick to recall it. So then I sort of upgraded the basic idea again, and I had that same sample, but then I looped. I built in the ability to loop that sample. And that also, worked surprisingly well. It's pulling that text directly off the blockchain and looping it. So I created another Audional that I could play over the top of it. That's just me clicking, that's why it's out of time. And then I also created another Audional, which I could then import into this one using this. So I can put the Audional ID in here and load. Now we've got a I love cheese. That was the third sample that I inscribed. But so that really was what triggered me to carry on with this crazy mission to bring music to Bitcoin, because I realized that what we've got here is something that's, I don't know how many people here make music or use digital audio workstations, but the way a digital audio workstation works is just a chain of you've got your audio, and then you've got a chain of plugins that you're running your audio through. And so once I'd realized that it was sort of possible to sequence things in this way, I sort of decided to take it a step further. And that was when I then conceived the idea for creating an actual sequencer that I could use to kind of, use these samples to create new music. And so here is, this is the current version of the sequencer that I've got here. which is currently a 16 channel, but I've initially created an 8 channel one, and that has also been inscribed, because this then becomes the engine for driving new songs. I can give you a little play of what I've got going on here. So this is just something that I put together last night just to try and link some samples together. And the sequencer has 16 sequences here. You can use a continuous play down the bottom here to allow it to move from sequence to sequence. Don't know how many people have actually used sequencers before, but each of these, the yellow and the blue and the red, they're buttons. And each of that button controls when the sample that's in that channel should be triggered and played. And so you can evolve through a song over these 16 sequences until you sort of build it into something that sounds, like a song. So that gives you an idea of what's kind of possible, and that, when you think about that, that's recursively accessing on-chain audio and converting it into a new format. And what you can actually do with that is convert it into, this is what the song file looks like. It's very small. It's just another JSON file, and it's just saying, okay, so we've got a URL here, so that might be my kick drum. Where is the kick drum being played in the 64 steps of the sequence, of the first sequence? And then you can bound, and this is an uncompressed file format, but the song format ends up being less than 1 kilobyte. And so that instantly, shows you what's possible, because now that you can reorganize these audio samples, you can create a song like this, and it's, like I said, it's like 1 kilobyte. But obviously we need a bit more than that, so then I came up with this as well, which is only 7 kilobytes, which is an inscribed synthesizer, which should work. If I reload, perhaps. There we go. So again, we can be playing these sounds directly off the chain, and if I just wanted to save a sequence of notes and the settings on there, it's tiny. It's a tiny, tiny amount of data, and now suddenly I can create a song that, interestingly, doesn't exist unless someone is executing the file, which is kind of profound. When people start to create music in this environment, it's going to need a shift in the way that labels sign songs, because they always sign a recording. And also how radio stations play songs, because ultimately what we want is to get to the point where the entire chain of production, from the composition through to the altering of the waveforms using on-chain plugins, right through to the mixing and eventually the mastering. Some people forget that this entire process can take place within the digital domain, which means we can do the entire process on-chain. We just need a bit more development, some more products, some more plugins. But what the really interesting thing that this gives way to, I'm sure lots of you know about Merkle trees. But if I bring this up here, so if we imagine that we've got a kick drum sample created by Jim, it's got embedded rights in it, so it's explaining what I'm expecting from people who might decide to use this sample. And then if I then use that sample, it goes through 2 effects units, and then it's mixed into a song. Perhaps I added a bit of low end to the kick or something, and it's used in a song. But then someone else can listen to that song and go, I really like the sound of that kick drum sound. It's not the original kick drum sound, it's the sound that I made in the song. And they can now put it through their own chain and make another song. Someone else can come back and go, I just love the sound that came out of that first effect unit in song 1. I'm going to chain off that, and I'm going to create my own version of the song. And remember, this is just the kick drum we're tracing here. But this can keep happening again and again. People can keep resampling it, reusing it. Eventually, by song 8, you've got this amazing chain we don't know what it's going to sound like by here, but it's gone through all of these effects units here, through songs, back to the original, but it always leads back to the original. It could take 10 years to get to here, but by the time it does, there's no mystery in where the sample came from, because the Merkle tree will always lead back to the root. And that also is a good way of showing that we don't have to think about the cost of inscribing the audio, because that kick drum sound that I've put on first, if you imagine someone creating a sample library of kick drum sounds, each of those separate effect unit chains is a new version of that kick drum without inscribing any more audio. And so the cost is offset by the fact that over time we'll be able to create lots and lots more samples that exist on chain. They never existed as real audio in the traditional sense. I can see I'm kind of running out of time. There's a couple of other bits I was going to show you, but I'd also like to take some questions if they're there. One thing, so this is the inscribed version of the first sequencer. So that's the inscription, which can then be used to power this player, for example. So this is now powered by the sequencer, but this is effectively a player that I can distribute as a song, and this player it's 400 bytes, and I know I can get it smaller than that as well. Which we should be able to get it down to a single line for the player recursively, which then chooses the song. And don't forget, this could be a song, it could be an album, it could be an anthology. The player size doesn't have to change for that. So we can distribute an album or a song or whatever you want in this player, which might cost 20 or 30 cents to inscribe, which suddenly it's competing with real world music distribution. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I have got lots more to do with regards to building more plugins and more synthesizers. And there's a couple of other bits I want to show you, but actually I'd rather sort of let people ask questions now. There's only 3 minutes left, so I'm going to leave it at that and take any questions. Yes.
I'm extremely excited about this. As I mentioned earlier, I was like, I was kind of thinking of something similar. But I didn't do anything. I just looked into how I would go about it. There's a couple of technologies that you may have slightly reinvented. One is called Structure Audio Orchestra Language, SAOL, and the other is Structured Audio Score Language. So one is for piecing together synthesizers and samples and so on, and the other is for putting them together into a song. And they're actually part of an MPEG standard. I think it was MPEG 7 or something.
Okay.
I think it died, like it faded away or something, but I would encourage you to have a look into that.
I definitely will do, for sure. Yeah. Anyone else got any questions? Oh.
Very non-technical question, but I didn't get the last part where you said you can have the whole album in the player, but still be the same size, and obviously.
Yeah, because of recursions. This player, for example, it doesn't have the song in it. It is referencing the song in another inscription. In fact, the player I think has 7 recursions going on. It's calling the sequencer. It's calling the song file. It's also calling some artwork here. You can have like the album artwork. I've also animated the buttons and things. There's any number of things you can do to these things. I've actually made 111 of these, by the way. I meant to say I was going to try and give some away for people who create. Go to audionals.com, create some cool songs. You just hit the save button on the sequencer, and it saves a JSON file, which you can then take to my Discord channel. Now, I meant to put the Discord, I meant to make a slide from my Discord and Twitter. It's jim.btc on Twitter, but please come and join the Audionals Discord and to see. But yeah, to answer your question, you could have any number of albums, playlists, whatever you want, that the player is just told, go and pull those in. That's all you have to do. So it's limitless. And so in terms of distributing in a peer-to-peer sense through Bitcoin wallets, what this does is it puts the creator at the center of a new economy where the PROs, the managers, the labels, they are still enablers, but they are no longer gatekeepers. They exist on the outside of the economy, and they send their invoices, which is, where we should have been a long time ago. I think someone down here. Oh, sorry, you got another question. Hey, dude.
Hey, how's it going? Hey,
Good.
great presentation. Loved
Thanks,
it.
man.
Curious, is the current step now to upload as many samples as possible? Like, how can we help? Like, how can...
I mean, so if you go onto audionals.com, there is a basic, I have set it up so that people can do these things themselves. Where is it? Just go back to the audionals.com. So if you click on inscribe your own audials up here, it brings up the Bitcoin Audional generator. Sorry, that's partly off screen there for some reason. See if I can pull that across. And so inside this, you've got some settings that you can set in there. We've got the audio type here. I can't move it now, but that's the audio type, creator's name, the name of the file, the duration of the file, and then some things that you can set over here. It's very basic. I have set up a much more intense form, but this is just, so you can do it right now. I would love to have some more samples on there. I don't have any indexer, so I kind of rely on people to tell me that they've done it so that I can then add them in the sequencer. I can then add them on these drop downs. So when someone clicks here, you can go through existing sequences. These are just playing again from the chain. I inscribed that because it's a step sequencer. I thought it was clever. So there's a list of samples here already. Longstreet has actually put a load of these Bitcoin step, which I'm hoping we might play later this evening. It's something that he's been working on for a long time. It would be great to get more samples on there. But again, it's just, what I'd really love is for people to create some more content. You use the samples that are there. All you got to do is click on the channel, and then you can select any of the existing samples, create a sequence, and then you just go down here and you just click save. And all that does, it literally just saves it as a JSON file, which you can then come onto the Audionals Discord, and you can show us that file. I can't show you that now that I just made, but it looks like the song file. It's not going to show, is it? But so you can then share that, and then anyone else can just go into the sequencer, and they can click load, and then they can just select your JSON, and it loads. There's no sending of project files, all the stuff we used to have to deal with in sending, and eventually that will also include all the instruments, everything, because it's all in the same domain. It's a really beautiful thing that's kind of starting here. So yeah, I just love people to get on there and do some creation. I have a show every Tuesday where I play only on-chain music, which I'm limited mostly to Rare Skrilla stuff and what I can do on here. But if more people could bring me some songs, I will play them on the show, and we can start to get people really excited about what's going on here. Yeah. The show is called On-Chained Melody. It's hosted by some guys called Bitcoin Live. They actually offered me a slot. It's every Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on my availability, but it's usually around 9 p.m. At night on UK time. On-Chained Melody. I think someone here, did you still have a question? No, okay. All good. Thanks a lot, everyone.